They marched in single file, boots crunching on snow that sounded like breaking glass. The moon hung low, scattering its light across the frozen fields east of Sevastopol. The patrol moved slowly, rifles raised, scanning for movement. None of them saw the man lying half buried beneath a thin sheet of frost. His breath had long since slowed to match the rhythm of the wind. When one soldier's heel pressed inches from his sleeve, the figure did not flinch. The white surface trembled once and went still again. He was a Soviet marksman, one of the invisible hunters who turned the winter itself into a weapon. For hours he had lain motionless, waiting for the faint silhouette of a helmet to cross his scope. To the enemy, he did not exist. To his own side, he was a rumor, a man said to vanish beneath the snow, leaving only the faint glimmer of ice where his eyes should be. Across the Eastern Front, snipers like him learned to merge with the frozen earth. They mixed snow, frost, and the reflection of moonlight until their outlines dissolved. Even patrols stepped over them without knowing. The secret was not magic, but something colder, an idea born of desperation and perfected through patience, the trick that made human beings disappear. Winter on the Eastern Front did not simply arrive, it conquered. By the first weeks of 1942, rivers had frozen into white corridors, forests stood motionless under glassy ice, and the land became a sheet of silence broken only by the echo of rifles. Visibility stretched for miles, yet movement meant death. One dark silhouette against a sea of white could betray an entire platoon. The cold punished metal and flesh alike, freezing rifle bolts and splitting skin until even pulling a trigger was agony. Soviet engineers issued rough white smocks and snow netting, but true survival depended on improvisation. Soldiers crushed chalk to dull the shine of boots, stitched burlap over helmets, and packed snow along their own shoulders to kill the outline of a man. Among them served Lyudmila Pavlichenko, the most successful sniper in Soviet history. From the defense of Odessa to the siege of Sevastopol, her name became legend, a woman who could wait 16 hours in snow without moving. Her discipline set the standard for every marksman who followed. By night, the sky turned silver with moonlight, and the snow itself glowed like cold fire. Out there, snipers learned that stillness could be deadlier than any rifle. But in the long, blinding nights, a few began to wonder whether snow could do more than hide them, whether it could make them vanish entirely. Keep watching. The discovery that turned frost into armor was only a breath away. It began as a rumor among frontline scouts, a trick whispered between trenches and half-frozen outposts. Someone had discovered that under moonlight, perfect white was not protection at all. The surface of snow gleamed too brightly. A motionless body became a dark dent against the glow. The key, they said, was not to hide from light, but to confuse it. Soviet snipers began experimenting with small changes. Some mixed frost with crushed ice to reflect 1,000 tiny sparkles instead of one steady shadow. Others rubbed glass powder into the fabric of their smocks, creating a faint shimmer that broke the clean silhouette of a body. A few stitched bits of foil or dull reflective thread scavenged from ration wrappers into seams so that light scattered unevenly. The science was crude, but the principle was sound. If the eye could not trace a consistent outline, it could not find the man. Field manuals never recorded the method. It spread by imitation and whispered success. Scouts returned from missions claiming that enemy patrols had passed within meters without noticing them. The technique demanded hours of preparation and absolute stillness. Even a breath too strong could ruin the illusion. Yet those who mastered it swore it changed the balance of night warfare. It was camouflage evolved beyond color, a way to vanish not into shadow, but into the glare of light itself. Next, you'll see how they put this eerie science to the test. Lyudmila Pavlichenko became the living proof that patience could outmatch any weapon. Her discipline shaped the Red Army's sniper schools, and her students carried her lessons into the frozen front. Among them, in this story, we follow Sergei Kuznetsov, a composite figure drawn from several memoirs, a young marksman who learned the new moonlight trick during the siege of Sevastopol. Sergei spent his nights crawling across ice-crusted ridges, guided only by the sound of the wind in telephone wires. Before each mission, he prepared his gear with ritual care, fabric rubbed with frost, glass dust sprinkled along seams, rifle barrel wrapped in dull white gauze. When the moon rose, his shape disappeared into a shimmer, like breath across polished steel. Nearby, another sniper kept watch through a frozen scope, whispering Pavlichenko's rule: see first, fire once, vanish completely. The experiment worked too well. A German patrol advanced over the ridge, flashlights flicking over drifts where Sergei lay buried. The beams scattered harmlessly off glittering frost. One soldier paused, sensing something wrong, then turned away. Sergei waited until the last footstep faded, then exhaled, the vapor curling invisibly into the cold. That night, he took 2 precise shots and slid back beneath the snow. At dawn, the enemy searched the area and found nothing, only the quiet sparkle of frozen air. But victory in the dark always carries a price. What came with the thaw would reveal it. Keep watching. When winter finally began to loosen its grip, the secret started to melt with it. The snow that had hidden hundreds of Soviet marksmen turned to slush, and what lay beneath began to surface. German burial patrols stumbled upon positions that looked like shallow graves, rows of white forms sealed in frost, rifles still in hand. Some were enemy, some their own, all preserved in a silence that chilled even hardened soldiers. Reports soon reached divisional command. The camouflage had been too effective. Men who had used the reflective frost method sometimes froze in place after days of motionless exposure. Others were mistaken for corpses by rescue teams and left behind. Commanders debated its ethics and practicality. It saved lives, but at a cost impossible to measure: isolation, frostbite, and psychological collapse. Soviet medical officers recorded cases of soldiers unable to blink or move normally for hours after leaving position. Lyudmila Pavlichenko herself, when later asked about the extreme lengths of concealment, warned that there was a fine line between discipline and self-destruction. The reflective technique quietly disappeared from official sniper instruction. Whether it was ever formally banned is unclear, no written order survives, but the phrase, "too effective to control and too cruel to sustain," appeared in after-action notes from several regimental summaries. As the thaw spread across Crimea, fields once white and pure turned grey and heavy with mud. There, the truth of the trick was finally visible. Genius and suffering intertwined, indistinguishable under melting snow. Next, you'll see how history remembered, and forgot, the ghosts who mastered this art. When the war ended, the method disappeared from official memory. No manuals described it, no officer claimed credit, and no museum display mentioned the crushed glass camouflage. The Red Army replaced improvised tactics with standardized uniforms and equipment, and the field innovation was quietly forgotten. Still, the idea behind it endured. The concept of scattering light and breaking a visual outline would later reappear in anti-reflective coatings, radar-deflecting paint, and advanced optical camouflage used by modern forces. What began as a desperate experiment in a frozen trench had become part of military science. Lyudmila Pavlichenko's record survived far longer. She became a decorated hero and an instructor, representing the professional face of Soviet marksmanship. In her post-war interviews, she spoke about patience and accuracy, but rarely about the mental toll of waiting motionless for hours in the cold. Veterans who trained under her later admitted that some lessons were never written down, techniques shared only in whispers between snipers who had lived through the winters of 1942. Today, historians can still find brief references to the reflective camouflage in scattered reports and personal diaries. It remains unclear how widely it was used, but the evidence shows it was real enough to influence later studies on concealment. The trick itself may have been buried by snow and time, but its logic endures. Control what the enemy sees, and you control the battlefield. We from Warfield Secrets, thank you for watching.